What's up, guys? Welcome back to another video. If you're new here, my name is Cole. I'm a freelance cinematographer and colorist based in Atlanta, Georgia. And today we're going to be talking about the key differences between cinema lenses and photography lenses. We're going to be shooting the same scene with an FX3 and then just having the exact same settings and just swapping between the two lenses. And one of the lenses is going to be the 24-70 G Master, and then the other lens is going to be the Arles Prime 35 millimeter. So before we get into the tests, I'm going to quickly run through some of the main differences that have been kind of known between cinema lenses and photography lenses, which are photography lenses are much sharper. They have more of a clinical look, less cinematic, I guess you could say. They also have more contrast, and that's mostly it. They just have like less character overall. And then cinema lenses, there's all kinds of different cinema lenses. Some can be more sharp, some can be less sharp. Some can have just more character, like crazy, swirly bokeh balls in the background, tons of distortion, you name it. Like they can really just be all over the place. It really depends on which one you get. But overall, they have more of a filmic, creamier look to them where they're not as sharp and they kind of have less contrast than photography lenses. And they have kind of more of like a soft, like roll off look to them, like in the shadows and the highlights. But then again, it depends on which one you get. That's just what I've noticed with the Arles Prime lenses that I have. Over the years, as I've come to develop more of a style as a cinematographer, I've always shot things, and then when I graded them in post, like I always kind of made them more soft and more filmic looking, adding things like glow, halation, pulling a lot of the sharpness out. And the more and more that I've shot with photography lenses, like the Sony lenses on like an FX3 or an FX6 over the years, I've really started to be like, why am I shooting on photography lenses? They're kind of like the opposite of what my style is, which is more, less sharp, less clinical, more just character and artifacts in the image. And the more I've shot on cinema lenses, I've come to develop more of my style, like using certain cinema lenses and getting away from that like sharp photography lens look. So now I have a bunch of lenses laying around, being like a Blazar lens, some like Arliss Prime lenses, another cinema lens, and then some photography lenses. So I really wanted to just do a one-to-one comparison and just see the differences myself. And I'm sure you've seen tons of these videos on YouTube, and I'm kind of tired of them too, which is why I'm going to mention that I don't think these videos or these one-to-one comparisons tell the whole story. Because a lot of the time when you look at the same image with two different lenses, it looks the same because you are shooting the same thing, but it's more something that you can feel a lot of the times. Like when you're looking at an image from like a nice cinema lens, like an ARRI whatever lens or a Cook lens, it's more something you feel when you look at it, and it just has this look to it that like if you put the exact same shot with a photography lens next to it, it wouldn't, like you might be like they look the same, but it's more just something you feel. All right, what is up, guys? We are in DaVinci Resolve over here, and we're going to go ahead and see if any of the things that I said are actually true. So we're going to hop over here to DaVinci. Yeah, shooting on the FX3, we're at f2.8, and then we're at t2.8 on the cinema lens. We are at ISO 800, 35 millimeter focal length, shutter 180, and white balance 4500 Kelvin in this room, and then 24 frames per second. And then, yeah, so we have these two clips here. First one is the first lens, and then next clip, second lens. So I already do know which one is which, but I'm not going to tell you guys, and we're going to kind of analyze it and like look at the differences of what's really happening. So, all right, I'm going to go over here ahead to the color page so we can kind of have some scopes open down here on the bottom right, and you can kind of see better what is happening. So we have our first clip, and then we have our second clip. I'll go ahead and play the first clip so you can just take a look at it a little more. And this was actually the exposure out of camera with each of these lenses. I did not do any tweaking in DaVinci. I have a node that'll adjust some things in a second that I'll show you. But this is our first lens, and then this is our second lens. And you can see that the second lens is much brighter off the bat. And that is actually probably just the difference between f-stops and t-stops. They're not exactly the same. So we have this exposure difference. They're not created equal, I guess. T-stops are supposed to be more of a accurate measurement of the light hitting the sensor. So yeah, off the bat, good bit exposure difference. Lens number 1 is a good bit darker, and then lens number 2 is a good bit brighter, and they're exactly the same, exact same camera settings, everything like ISO, all that stuff. So let's go ahead and like take a look and like just see what differences we really have. So I have this node up here. I'm gonna just turn this on, and it's more just to just an exposure adjustment. So I'm gonna go ahead and flip these on for both. And this is giving us just like a, more accurate exposure for the skin tones for both. And the way I'm like figuring that out too is I'm using this plugin. This is from Mononodes, and it pretty much just lets you have like false color. So you can see exactly where your exposure is. So I have it to where there's a little bit of gray on the highlight, and then which you can see, there, and then second lens, just a little bit of gray on the highlight as well. So that's how I did the matching. So for the first lens, I had to pull it up about a stop, and then the second lens about half a stop. So I'll go ahead and turn that off. So yeah, now the exposure is different. And then the next thing that is really different, if I pull up the vector scope here, so you see this lens is looking like this, and then this lens is a good bit warmer. Like it has more of a warmer temp to it as well. And this lens is much cooler and almost has more of a magenta shift as well. So if I'm looking at the vector scope, you can see this first lens is kind of more to the right on the vector scope down here. So it's got more of that magenta shift, and then this lens is more just on towards the skin tone line. So I'd say more accurate skin tones on the second lens. So yeah, that's like the second key difference. And then the next thing that I noticed, let me just go here and start punching in. So I'm mainly looking at just the overall, the softness and everything. And definitely this first lens is a lot sharper for sure. So I'm like looking at my face. I'm looking at the background as well. Like if I go over here and kind of look back here, it just has like a softer texture on the second lens. Like when I just kind of go around the background here. It's kind of one of those things where it's hard to tell, but it's more something you can kind of feel. Like when you flip between them, you're like, yeah, I kind of feel like this one's a good bit softer. But then you can really see it. So if I go down here to the highlights, it's easier to see on my actual color grading monitor over here. But the highlights, the shadows down here, you can really see like the way that they roll off. There's almost like more detail in the second lens, like in the shadows. And that could be a little bit of the exposure difference, but I come over here and look at the highlights as well. So this is lens number one. When I look at the highlights up here, they almost look a little like punchier or more contrasty, kind of, if that makes any sense. A little harsher. And then when I go to the second lens, they're a little creamier and softer. And they're almost a little more compressed. So like when I'm looking at the waveform, when I'm on this, you can almost see like they're a little pointier. Like if you're looking at the bottom right down there, it's like a little pointier and like harsher. And then you look at this and they're a little, it's like mainly that little peak is a little smoother. So it's like the highlights are a little more compressed and creamy looking. I might just be getting like super nerdy here, but yeah. So in a way, it almost feels like the second lens is giving us more dynamic range, even though it technically probably isn't, but it almost feels like it is because I'm just seeing more detail like in the shadows here. Like it's almost got like a smoother kind of roll off here. And same thing with the highlights. Like it almost feels like it's retaining more information. And it's like smoother as like this first one. It feels like right here is I don't even know how to explain this. It just feels like there's a bigger contrast difference in this outside part opposed to here where it's like this kind of smooth like creamy highlight, and then this is like not as smooth on this one. So that's like a really big thing I'm noticing like off the bat. So I'm going to go ahead out here and I can go ahead and tell you guys which lens is which now that we've been kind of comparing them and looking at it. And I want you guys to leave a comment below which lens do you think is which before I reveal it. I want you to drop a comment and say, I like lens 1, I like lens 2, and tell me like which one you like, because at the end of the day it's just like what do you like more. There's not like one that's better, at least in my opinion. So there's one that I like better, but you know. So I'm gonna go ahead and reveal that. So the first lens is the photography lens. This is the 24-70 G Master 2 to be exact of which one it is. And they're both at 35 and they're both at the same aperture. But yeah, this is the first one, and I definitely could tell a pretty big difference. Like if I were to look at these blind, I mean, the first thing that would give it away is the color. I would immediately, because I just know that the Arles Prime has like a more warm tint to it, like out the gate. So I would have seen that, but I could have corrected it with like a node like this. And then it gets a little harder. You're like, okay, wait, which one is it? But then it's not really like a exact thing that you're noticing that gives it away. It's more just like a feeling. So when I'm looking at this, it just feels different than this. But I probably, like, if I was able to like look at the highlights like this, I probably would have been able to tell just like, oh yeah, the way the highlights go. And the really big one was this little table down here in the shadows. Like it almost just, it looked like there was just more of a smoother roll off into the shadows than the first one. And then also on my face as well, the shadows just seemed like harsher almost on, well, actually, maybe they're not. Like I'm looking at it now and it's like harder to tell when I balanced out the exposure. But if I like take off that exposure change, it was definitely like, felt like, I mean, that could just be the exposure though. It's tough to say, but it feels crunchier because the photography lenses do have a harsher contrast. So those like shadows are getting like pushed down more. So it's actually retaining like less information in the camera pretty much, if that makes any sense. So the question becomes, which lens is better? And like I said, I think it just it depends what you're filming and what kind of look you're going for. So my first few years of filming, I filmed on photography lenses primarily with like an A7S III. And the more I've gotten into cinema lenses the past couple of years, I've really come to understand like what my style is and what I like. And for me, I like more of a more character in my lenses and less sharp of lenses, because I always would end up doing that in post with like effects and stuff. And I'm just like, if I already know that that's what I like and what I want, then I should just use the lenses that are going to give me that. And if you're shooting like something like corporate maybe and you want more like just tack sharp look, the photography lenses could be better. But to me, like I've come to just I like the softer, more like cinematic look, I guess you could say. Um, but yeah, that's just my opinion. You guys can let me know what lenses that you like in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video or learned anything from this, let me know. Leave a comment, like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.